The old train rattled along the tracks, its dimly lit compartments swaying gently with the motion. In the last car, a lone passenger sat by the window, her reflection a pale ghost against the blackened glass. Elise Harper, her name stitched neatly into the worn leather tag on her bag, sat with an air of uneasy composure. Her small leather bag rested on her lap, the brass clasp worn but sturdy, as if it had endured countless journeys before this one. The conductor passed through the aisle without a word, his eyes lingering on Elise for a second too long. She didn't look up, but her fingers tightened imperceptibly around the bag. Outside, the landscape was a blur of dense forests and empty fields, but her attention remained fixed inward, as though listening for something only she could hear. In the distance, a whistle sounded, a low, mournful cry that seemed to echo longer than it should. Elise's gaze shifted slightly, catching the faint outline of another figure at the far end of the car. The man sat with his head bowed, a wide-brimmed hat obscuring his face. She hadn't noticed him bored, and yet there he was, as still as a statue. The train lurched unexpectedly, causing the lights to flicker. For a moment the car was plunged into near darkness. When the light returned, the man had shifted, closer now, though he had not made a sound. His hat still cast a shadow over his features, but his posture was more rigid, like a predator poised to strike. Elise adjusted her grip on the bag, her calm exterior betraying the slightest crack. She glanced at the door leading to the next car, calculating the distance. As if sensing her thoughts, the man spoke, his voice low and gravelly, carrying easily across the otherwise silent compartment. "Elise Harper," he said, dragging her name out like a secret he had no right to know. "You won't make it far, not without them noticing." Her lips parted slightly, and she forced herself to steady her breathing. Them? Her mind raced, weighing her options. She pressed her back against the seat, feigning calm as she asked who he meant. The man's head tilted upward, and for the first time she saw his face. His eyes were pale, almost colourless, and they locked onto hers with an intensity that made her stomach churn. "They're already watching," he said, leaning forward so the brim of his hat no longer cast a shadow. "You've been running a long time, but the end of the line's closer than you think." His hand moved slowly to the inside of his coat, and Elise tensed, preparing to bolt. She didn't wait to see what he would do. Clutching the bag, she darted for the door to the next car, her boots echoing against the metal floor. The train lurched again, and she stumbled, catching herself against the narrow wall. Behind her, the man's voice called out, colder now, "You can't outrun what you've done, Elise Harper. You'll have to face it sooner or later." She slammed the door shut behind her, her heart pounding as she locked it. The corridor ahead was empty, but the sense of being followed clung to her like a second shadow. She didn't stop, her legs carrying her forward, even as a terrible question echoed in her mind. Who was watching, and how much time did she have left?